Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for choosing this particular section. I am indeed part branding consultant, part science fiction author. I've been a musician. I actually fronted a heavy metal band once, which was great. If anyone wants to start a mosh pit, throw things at the stage, please do. I'm very used to that. It makes things more fun. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today is future-proofing your brands with stories. So it brings together two great obsessions of mine. First of all, storytelling, how you tell powerful stories that really engage people, that move them and help them understand the world in new ways. So partially it's all about the storytelling, and partially it's all about the brands. And brands they both are stories themselves, and they sit within other people's stories. So I'm going to be talking about that. But actually, let's get stuck in. Oh. Yes, it's working. I was clicking the wrong side. Science fiction authors are always tripped up by technology. It's one of the rules. Who are these guys? Sherlock Holmes and? Awesome. And does everyone here, is there anyone here who doesn't know Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson? No, broadly you all know who they are. Fantastic. What are they famous for then? Solving crimes detection, yeah. They are very famous for that. Sherlock Holmes in particular. Sherlock Holmes is famous for solving crimes. He's famous for always, always, always being the most right person in any given room. He always understands what's going on. He always helps other people understand it. And because of that, he always solves the crime, with one or two exceptions. Dr. Watson is very famous as well. But there's an odd thing, because the thing that Dr. Watson is famous for is the one thing Sherlock Holmes always complains about when he's talking. It comes and goes. Can you hear me here?
Yes.
Is it working? Or is it this one better? Right, I'm going to stick with this one. They didn't have microphone problems in Victorian times. I'm very jealous of them. So Dr. Watson is very interesting because Dr. Watson is the person who tells the story of their adventures. And Sherlock Holmes is always complaining about that, something he does very consistently. He says, look, Dr. Watson, you tell these stories, you make them too emotional, you make them too fluffy, you put in useless information about the people that we're dealing with, the crimes we're trying to solve. They're a waste of people's time. And what Sherlock Holmes really wants is a kind of bullet-pointed PowerPoint presentation in about 20 slides that makes everything strict and logical and rational. And that's what he thinks Watson should do. And he's actually quite wrong. Because the reason that Sherlock Holmes is immortal, and he is, he's pretty future-proof, he's survived for 100 years, his stories still read incredibly freshly, there have been countless movies of him, there have been television shows, there have been comic strips, there's been anything you can possibly imagine. The stories are incredibly powerful, and the stories that Dr. Watson tells are what has made Sherlock Holmes absolutely immortal. And that's because that's what stories do. That's what stories exist to do. Stories exist to share information, but not just to share information in a way that's impactful and powerful and completely unforgettable and persists in your mind long after you've told the story. And there's a lot of neuroscience that backs that up. I've got a friend who's a psychiatrist who does a whole talk on this stuff. I'm not going to go into it in detail. For the purposes of this talk, all you really need to know is that if you share information with someone, if you give them a set of bullet points or a set of facts, all that really lights up are the kind of languaging processing parts of their brain to take the information in, then a tiny bit of memory. If you tell someone a story, if you turn into Dr. Watson, the whole of your brain lights up. All the emotional parts of it, all the empathetic parts of it. And what happens to you as you listen to the story is that in a sense, you in a virtual kind of way, you experience the story as if you were in it with yourself. You become a part of it. And because you're a part of it, all the information that comes with it reaches you in a very powerful, very memorable way. And that's why stories are fantastic in themselves, because you're part of the story. What's not to like? Thrilling, exciting story, you're on the edge of your seat listening to it. But it's also why branding can use stories to make very powerful points and to become very memorable and to become future-proof. Because if you wrap your brand up in stories and tell your brand as if it was a story, or talk to someone as if you were part of their story, then you have that kind of powerful, memorable impact. And how do I know about this? Well, you've kind of heard it already. I'm a science fiction writer. Those are my two books there. I've worked with a lot of brands. Those are some of the brands I've worked with. And I learned how to tell stories working in feature film development. So that's a pile of film scripts there. I read and Hello? I read and critically analysed about 500 different film scripts, taking them to pieces, working out how they work. So that was how I first learned about stories. So that's my kind of story background. One of the really important things about stories, one of the things you always say is show, don't tell. So that's all the telling you're going to get. Now I'm going to show you how stories work, and I'm going to show you 3 particular things. I'm going to show you how to structure a story in a very basic way, so you can start telling stories and understanding stories more effectively. I'm going to show you how characters work within story, and I'm going to show you 4 different character archetypes that you can use to start thinking about the kind of character you are, the kind of character you want your brand to be, the kind of role you want to play that helps your customers. And finally, we're going to touch very quickly on tone of voice. And I'm going to talk about this stuff, and we'll get a bit workshoppy as well, and you'll get to sort of run through some exercises which will help you understand this for your brand. One of the things I'm not is a trained actor. So I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of ran out of breath with that long sentence there, so I apologise. If I was an actor, I'd be much better at pacing my sentences. Structuring your story. Okay, this is all you need to know. This is my novel film script story writing course in a single slide. Almost every story you will ever run into is structured in a very particular way. Hero wants to do something, hero can't do something, hero does something. It starts by introducing the hero, introducing the motivation. Who is this person? What is the important thing they need to do? Why does it matter so much? Hero wants to do something. And then it moves on to hero can't do something. The hero usually runs into a series of obstacles which they find it difficult to overcome. But they learn how to overcome them, and you engage with them as they learn how to overcome them. They become better people through overcoming them. And finally, they learn how to do something. That's Act 3 of the story. And when they do something, you find out not just what happens when they do it, woohoo, I've won, you know. You find out what it means to them to do it. So if you take Jaws as an example, everyone's seen Jaws, everyone knows what it's about, yeah? Okay. Hero wants to kill shark. Hero can't kill shark. Hero kills shark. That's the story of Jaws. You don't need an hour and a half to tell the story. You need 3 sentences. All stories work like that. And you can use that structure yourself when you're telling stories. First of all, about your own business. So this guy is Stuart Butterfield, and he's the person who set up and runs Slack. You all know Slack, yeah? Incredibly powerful kind of conversational engagement online tool. It was the most successful startup in history. After 8 months, it was valued at $1 billion with no chief marketing officer, nothing like that at all. And it was so successful and so powerful, partially because it's a very good app, but partially because Stuart Butterfield is very, very good at telling stories. And if you watch interviews with him and engage with him, the story he tells about how he created Slack is always the same. He always says, right, well, we started off, and we really wanted to help people have kind of fun, constructive experiences online. Hero wants to do something. And we wanted them to get together and do that in groups. So that's kind of Act 1, establish motivation. This is what we're trying to do. So we went off and we built a game. And the game was designed to help people collaborate online in a fun, constructive way. But no one wanted to play it. So hero wants to do something, hero can't do something. We built this game, no one wanted to play it. But then we discovered that the communications tool we used to talk to each other while we were creating this game was actually fantastic, and everyone wanted to use it, and we thought, this is brilliant, this is our product. So we launched that as a product, it became Slack, and it took off. Hero does something. So Hero wants to do something. We want people to have fun, constructive experiences together online. Hero can't do something. We tried to do it through a game, but we failed. Hero does something. That led us to Slack, and then we did it. So you can see that basic structure there working, how he told the story and how he pitched it to people. But there's a problem there as well, because me is the worst ever sales pitch. So if you said that, I'm awesome. Let me tell you how awesome I am. Have I told you that I am totally awesome? I am awesome. You will immediately go, if you're being sold to, no, this is not for me, thank you very much. And I don't know about you, but I have an inbuilt tendency as well to just not believe people when they tell me something about themselves. Because I think, if this person really wants me to believe this, it's probably not true. And I always think of the used car salesman. Hello, I'm very honest. Let me sell you a car. And yeah, exactly. Immediately you go, no, and you run away, you flee. So you need to think not about what the story about yourself you want to tell is. You've got to think about your customer's story. You've got to think about the customer as a hero, and you've got to think, how do I fit into their story in the right kind of way? So for example, has anyone here, you've all bought Coca-Cola, yeah? You've all bought a can of Coca-Cola on a cold day. And when you've drunk your can of Coca-Cola, you've never thought, how much gratitude do I have for the role I have played in enhancing Coca-Cola's brand and bringing them to fruition in the world? No one ever thinks that. You think, wow, I'm hot, I've drunk a Coke, now I'm cool, and I feel energized. Brilliant. Coke has made themselves part of your story. And these guys, Weber Barbecues, who I'm kind of obsessed with, are past masters at making people at inserting themselves into the story of the people who use their products. So, Weber Barbecue, you start with uncooked chicken, and it looks kind of horrible, and that's deliberate. Whenever I do this talk in Brighton, I always offend vegetarians with this image. So if you're a vegetarian, I'm really sorry, but I have to show you this, because all stories start with a world where something is a bit broken and a bit wrong, and there is something a bit horrible about uncooked chicken. And Weber Barbecue say, okay, we sell people barbecues, we help people barbecue food, you know, that's great. But most people can't barbecue, and a lot of people end up with the horror of the chicken that's burnt on the outside and pink on the inside and is horribly embarrassing and terrible to serve. So we're not just about we don't just insert ourselves into people's story with a barbecue. We do it with all the things that help them barbecue. We put out cookbooks, we run barbecuing courses, we sell the tools you need, we sell fantastic charcoal and briquettes. They've thought, what is our customer's story? Customer wants to barbecue awesome food. Customer can't barbecue awesome food. Customer barbecues awesome food. They've looked at the obstacles their customers are facing. I do not know how to barbecue. It's not a common part of the culture. And they've thought, how do we help them overcome this? How do we help them barbecue as well as possible? So they've understood their customer's story, and they've found the right way to insert themselves into that. And that's a very strong sales pitch. You understand your customer, you understand the story they're moving through, and you think, how do I insert myself into the story? What's the constructive role I can play in that story, and how do I then talk to my customer about that? So, that's the basics of story structure. Do you all understand that? Any questions at this point? Does that make sense? Brilliant. So, what I'd like to do now is the practical stuff. What time? Brilliant. We're running roughly according to time. Right, so I have here lots of worksheets. Yeah, please. Okay, and before we do anything, what I'd like you to do is two things. First of all, if you're sat at a table on your own, or if you're on a table with 3 people, get into pairs. I want everyone in pairs, okay? Find a partner, find someone to be together with. A story only exists if it is somehow heard. Okay, and secondly, as you look down the front page, you'll say that you, our customer, really, really need to. So underneath the first kind of orangey, Act 1, hero wants to do something. So you, our customer, where it says R, cross that out and write in the name of your company, please. We're personalising the sheets. It's an exciting moment. Okay, done that? And secondly, a bit further down, under hero can't do something, it says, which wheel help you overcome? And where it says wheel, just write in the name of your company again. So it's kind of clear that it's your particular company that we're talking about. Okay, so you've done that. And now, can you swap sheets with your partner? So you each just received a sheet that's about the company of your partner. And what I'd like you to do is kind of interview your partner and say, okay, let's go through this. Let's see, what does your customer really, really need to do? What are the obstacles that they're facing that you can help them overcome? How do you help them overcome it? And then finally, what does that mean for them? What's the big thing that changes because of that? It's not just, I'm going to help you sell more widgets. It's, okay, we're going to help you become the biggest widget seller in the world, and you will achieve every promotion you've ever dreamt of, crush the opposition, and you'll never have to work again. Perhaps. What's the awesome thing you help your customer do? And what I'd like to do is spend 5 minutes each doing a kind of two-way thing. So first, interview each other, talk through, work out what the customer story of your partner's company is, and just make some notes about it on the piece of paper. Is that clear? Any questions at all? Yeah? Brilliant, that's great. So 5 minutes each, interview your partner, work out what the story that they're becoming a part of is. Okay, and I'm going to wander around and chat. Okay, how's it going? Everyone getting through it okay? So this is normally something, because what we're doing is kind of looking to build a whole basic story for your business and the way it interacts with other people. And we're doing it at super high speed. We've done it in about 10 minutes. Normally it's something you would spend days or weeks doing. So this will feel, on the one hand, it probably feels a bit superficial, but what I'm hoping is that you're getting a sense of the model and how it works and how you can fit yourself into your customer's story. Is that working for you? Yeah, any interesting thoughts or insights? Has anything struck anyone that they wouldn't have thought about before? Yeah?
Just to strip out the jargon that you might use internally, your customer can't understand.
Absolutely, that's a tremendously important thing to do. Talk to people in their own language. You're part of their story, they're not part of your story. Any other thoughts at all coming out of it? Oh, yeah?
We talked about how in accountancy, if someone runs their own business and they really understand their own world, they might not want to admit that they don't understand accountancy, they don't understand their numbers and their books, so they either don't ask the right questions or they don't engage properly. So it's about how can the accountant, bring them in and make them feel comfortable.
Brilliant, and that too can be a very big shift in how you talk about and sell yourselves, because you're moving from saying, I'm a very efficient accountant, great, but so what? Let me help you understand what I do. It's essential to your business. Let me teach you, let me take you by my hand. Any other thoughts at all? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's such an important point. The single most useful question in branding and marketing and sales, that whole field, is so what? Because if you create a communication and someone can look at it and go, so what? That communication has failed. And you're absolutely right, it's all about avoiding the so what. And there was a lovely point there about being a mentor, and that leads us very smoothly onto our next bit. Oh. Pinning down your personality. So, every brand is part of a story, and every brand has a distinct personality as part of that story. And we are now going to Hollywood archetypal script theory to think about how that works. So, someone called Christopher Vogler, who is a major Hollywood script doctor, drew on Joseph Campbell, who's very big into kind of archetypal storytelling and myth, who drew on Carl Jung to think about the idea of archetypes. And do you know what archetypes are? The theory is that in every single story, there are recurring types of characters who always play the same kind of role. And there are hundreds and hundreds of possible archetypes. If you Google archetypes, hundreds of them come up. Christopher Vogler drew on all the myth thinking and stripped down positive archetypes into these four. So he thinks that in any sort of story, you can be one of four things. You can be an icon. So you're the person that everyone looks up to and everyone admires and wants to be like them. And that's motivation. I want to be like that person. Those are the values I'm going to try and live up to. You can be a mentor. You can teach people. You can help people learn. So Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, Yoda in Star Wars, all mentors. You can be an ally. You can be a sidekick. You can be there through the rough and tumble and help people out. Or you can be a herald. And heralds are people who pop up and say things have got to change. And you get this in Star Wars. In Star Wars, dead Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you can see him floating there, looking a bit blue, he kind of becomes an icon that everyone admires. Yoda is a teacher. Yoda teaches Luke Skywalker how to be a better Jedi. He's his mentor. Han Solo is an ally who always pops up at the important moment and helps people do what they need to do. And Princess Leia plays a really interesting role. Princess Leia is a change maker. She is the person who makes it clear when things have to change. And these people are all subordinate to the hero's story, but you as brands are all subordinate to your customer's story. You are not the hero. The customer is the hero, and you help them in certain ways. And these archetypes are really useful because they can help you think about how you help people, what it is you do for them. So in brand terms, I tend to see Bowden as a sort of icon brand, because I look at Bowden catalogues or whatever and I think, if only my life was a beautiful middle-class idyll like that. Yeah, you've been there, haven't you? And you look at it and you think, I will never live up to the Bowden catalogue. And then I had a glorious moment. A friend of mine from school, his kids were in a Bowden's catalogue. And I was like, I have approached Bowden. Maybe one day they will come to me and I will get to be fully Bowden. So they play a kind of iconic role for me as a customer. Weber, I've talked about, they teach you how to barbecue, and they very clearly said to themselves, we are going to be mentors. You're an accountancy firm. You want to be mentors. You want to help people learn how to understand and engage with the world of accountancy. Ronseal are fantastic. They don't teach you how to do DIY, but they're always there for you for the sticky bits with the really boring but utterly essential products that will help you get through it. And finally, Nike are heralds. Just do it. Change. Change your life somehow. They say you've got to change, they help you do it. A lot of gyms tend to be herald brands. They say you've got to change your life, you've got to change your lifestyle. It's a big thing in health brands. Now this is a short, snappy presentation, so I've just got these 4 up here. There are hundreds and thousands of archetypes. You can get jesters, warriors, all kinds of things. Google them and you can find them. And also every character in every movie ever made, every story ever told, you can look at them and say, do I want my brand to act like that? Do I want to be like, I don't know, Merlin? I've got a theory that all management consultants are secretly Merlin. And I've also thought, in general, in business, you're either a King Arthur, you lead and get things done and take decisions, or you're a Merlin, you sit and think about things and provide wise advice. So those are 2 of my personal archetypes. So that's archetypes, that's how they can help you tell your brand story, because they can guide the kind of communications you create, the way you help people, perhaps even the services you create for themselves. If Weber hadn't thought we're mentors, what does that mean? They wouldn't have started creating such fantastic cookbooks. It can help you define not just how you communicate, but what you actually do for people. So this is the next thing, and what time? Oh, yeah. So what I'd like you to do very quickly, just think about the brands you've just been talking about, and either grab one of these, or take any character you want, any archetype you want, and say, right, what is that brand? What kind of person is it? What kind of archetype is it? Just take a minute or 2 to do that very quickly. Is that clear? Does it make sense? Yeah. Excellent. And I'll zip round again. Any questions? Sorry. Yeah, just pick one. If you want, yeah. Create archetypes. Be creative. You're telling a story for yourself. Okay. How are you guys doing? All making sense? Right. Any interesting thoughts occur before we move on to tone of voice?
That you can be more than one.
You can be more than one, that's very important. And it's a great way of thinking about building relationships with people, that you move through different relationships with them as you go, and you can chart out what you need said at each point in the relationship. So being more than one can be a very positive thing. Any other thoughts? No? Awesome. So what we'll do then, and I apologise so much, I could spend days or weeks talking about this. I go off on writers' workshops for a week at a time to talk about this stuff, and we're doing it in 45 minutes. So we're moving super quickly, and we're going to move on to tone of voice. So, tone of voice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Does anyone recognise where that quote comes from? Dickens, good shot. Pride and Prejudice, yeah. It's the opening sentence of Pride and Prejudice. And it's basically saying, if you've got some money, you probably need a wife, shortening it right down, which is very reductive. I apologise to the ghost of Jane Austen. But what it's doing is saying that in a very particular tone of voice. So when you read not what it says, but how it says it, you're left with a very particular set of impressions. You're going to be reading a story that's probably quite genteel, because it's very genteel language, isn't it? You're going to be reading a story that's probably set in the past, because it's very historic language. You're going to be reading a story that's probably about someone getting married, because it talks about a wife. So the words it chooses to use, tell you a lot about the kind of story you're going to run into. Now, check this out. Everybody knows that a single geezer with a bit of the old Bugs Bunny in the tank got to get himself a Duchess of Fife. Know what I mean? So that is exactly the same set of ideas. It's just expressed through Cockney rhyming slang rather than genteel late 18th century English. But because the language has changed, when you read it, it looks like you're going to get a totally different story. It's probably going to be set in the East End of London. It's probably going to be a bit EastEnders. It's going to have lots of geezers in it. It's probably going to be a bit like one of those films from the 90s where someone accidentally steals lots of drugs and Danny Dyer's in it. Yeah, you know what I mean? And all we've done is change the tone of voice. We haven't changed any of the thoughts that sit behind the language. We've just changed the language itself. And what you've just been doing is thinking about the kind of stories you're a part of. And then you've thought about the kind of role you play in those stories. And the next step, the next question to ask after that is, if I am this kind of person in this kind of story, how do I talk? And you have to get that right as well. If you want to be convincing, if you want people to kind of engage with you without creating barriers to that, you need to find the right tone. If I wanted to go and be a butler has a very particular tone of voice. If I turned up and said, hello, I would rather like to be a butler, brilliant, you know, that's hurdle one overcome. If I turn up and I'm all cockney, I'm like, all right, I want to be a butler, mate. No one will take me seriously because that's not what butlers sound like. So there's a question you've got to ask yourself. What does my business sound like? Not just what do I tell people, but how do I tell it to people? And that can lead to kind of very, very big choices about the way people talk. If you go to someone like Innocent, they're the classic cliched example. You know, people have spent the last 10 or 15 years using them as a workshop example to say this is what a very strong tone of voice looks like. But the reason they are a cliche is that they do it brilliantly. When they started out, they had no marketing and no advertising budget. The only thing they had was their packs. And so what they said to themselves is, we will define our brand through the way we use language on our packs. And they've done a fantastic job of that. And they're still doing it, and it still works because they did it so well. There are smaller ways you can change things as well. So this is from Vodafone. I worked with Vodafone for a bit to help them with their tone of voice. You have chosen Vodafone to supply your mobile phone and related services. Now, anything wrong with that? It's quite boring, yeah. It's boring and it's bland. It gives you some information, but it does nothing with it. Before we started working with them, they hadn't thought about their tone of voice. And we made some very small changes. I'm not saying everyone here should suddenly start talking like Innocent, or like Ray Winston, or like Sean Connery, making those huge changes. You can make very small changes as well. So check this out. Thank you for choosing Vodafone to help you stay in touch. And it's just like that Jane Austen quote. It's exactly the same ideas, only the words have changed. But how has it changed?
It's just more personal, more friendly.
It's more personable, it's more engaging, and it's more friendly. So one of the things, when you talk about tone of voice, one of the things that people think is that you're automatically saying, yeah, you've got to sound like one of the crazy, faux matey, over-friendly brands that are out there. That's become a cliche of tone of voice. But you don't have to. When you're thinking about how do we sound, how do we bring the particular kind of brand we are to life through our language, you can make small changes too. And they can have a big impact because they make you a warmer and friendlier and more engaging presence. And what I've done with the end there, it's kind of the final over to you bit because we're about to end. There's a bit saying, okay, you know, what sort of person are you? What 3 words describe you? And then what does that mean for your brand language? So it's something to take away and think about. And all of this stuff is stuff to take away and think about. Good stories don't happen instantly. For both of my books, every book gets rewritten lots of times before it goes out. And that rewriting, basically going through the whole book of about 120,000 words, making more or less major changes to it. The first book, I did that 17 times for it. The second book, I did that 15 or 16 times. The stories you're going to tell about your brands, what you're at now is the very first draft, and they're very basic. Rethink, let it sit in the back of your head, test it out on people, redraft and redraft until you get it right. Part of that is getting the tone of voice right. But in general, what you need to think about, tell your brand as a 3-act story, make it a part of your customer's story, play a really essential role in that story. Be a strong character, use strong characters, think about them as a clear defined character with clear wants and needs of their own, think about how you can fulfill them. And finally, get your tone of voice right, because you can have the best sense of your character in the world and it can be profoundly relevant to the person you're speaking to, but if you speak to them with kind of bland technocratic language, if you're overly matey, if you get your tone wrong, that takes away from the power of your message. And those 3 things together will help you tell your brand as a story and play an essential role in your customers' stories. And we've done a bit to start thinking about that. All of this stuff is stuff to take away and think about and really dig into. So I hope we've set some good seeds in your heads today. I'm around for the rest of the afternoon. Grab me if you want to chat about any of this stuff, because I can go for hours on it. I love it all. Thank you very much, and thank you for getting stuck into the exercises. Cheers.